The Astraeus hung in the void like a ghost, its battered hull barely visible against the swirling orange haze of Titan's atmosphere. Captain Elias Voss clenched the controls, his breath shallow as static hissed through the comms. Then a voice, broken and desperate. There beneath the ice they're waking up. The transmission died in a burst of noise, leaving only silence and the creeping dread that something out there had just spoken back. The crew exchanged glances, no coordinates, no explanation, just a warning from the dark, and the chilling certainty that whatever waited below the moon's frozen surface was no longer sleeping. The Astraeus shuddered as it pierced Titan's thick orange skies, the groan of stressed metal harmonizing with the howl of methane winds. Landing struts bit into the frozen crust, scattering plumes of nitrogen ice like brittle glass. Engineer Ryland leaned over the console, his reflection warped in the flickering readouts. The scanner feed showed fissures spider-webbing outward, too precise, too symmetrical. His voice was barely audible over the creaking hull. "This isn't geology." A gloved finger traced the jagged lines on the screen. "It's architecture." Before anyone could respond, the deck lurched beneath them. The scanners erupted in a chorus of alarms, painting the holographic display in violent red. Something vast shifted below, a shadow moving against the ice. The crew held their breath as the vibrations deepened, each tremor a silent question. Had they landed on Titan, or something that had been waiting for them? Dr. Lien Tran's gloves crunched against the ice as she pried the sample free, a jagged black tendril, coiled like a fossilized serpent. The moment her fingers brushed its surface, frost evaporated in a hiss, revealing a slick, oil-dark sheen. Then it moved, the tendril liquefied, writhing up her arm faster than anyone could react. She screamed, not from pain, but from the impossible sensation of something slithering beneath her skin. The crew recoiled as the last traces of black vanished into her wrist, leaving only a faint web of veins pulsing dark under her pale flesh. Her breath came in ragged bursts, eyes widening until the brown of her irises swallowed itself, leaving only bottomless pupils. Elias stepped forward, blocking the others as they reached for weapons. His voice was steel. "We don't leave until we know what this is." Behind him, Lien's head tilted at an unnatural angle, her lips parting in a whisper no human throat should have been able to produce. A sound like cracking ice and something far older answering from the depths below. The research outpost loomed ahead like a broken rib cage, its metal frame twisted and half buried in the ice. Elias moved first, pulse rifle raised, the beam of his helmet light cutting through the methane haze. Inside, the walls were a nightmare of scribbled equations, half-finished calculations smeared in something dark and flaking. Ryland's boot sent a shattered helmet skittering across the floor. The visor was still fogged, frozen in the shape of a last, ragged breath. Then they saw it, the words clawed into the steel above a gutted terminal. They bore upward. The air tasted like rust and ozone. Someone had been desperate enough to carve that warning with bare hands. Lien's fingers trembled as she activated the last intact log. A voice, garbled and wet, sputtered through the speakers. "Day 17, the drilling. We didn't understand. The ice isn't ice, it's a membrane. They're singing to us now." Not through the comms, through the walls. The recording dissolved into static, then a sound that wasn't static at all. A low, harmonic hum, like a choir of throats that had never learned human speech. Ryland's scanner flared to life, casting jagged shadows as it mapped the chamber. His breath hitched. "Captain, look at the floor." The metal plating wasn't warped from damage. It was bent outward, as if something massive had pushed up from below. The edges gleamed too smooth, too deliberate. Elias crouched, running a gloved hand along the fissure. Cold seeped through the material, biting deeper than Titan's chill. Then, faint but undeniable, a vibration, not from the storm outside, from beneath them. Lien's head snapped up, her pupils swallowing the light. "They're still singing," she whispered, and this time the others heard it too. The transmission crackled back to life, but the voice wasn't static, frayed, or broken. This time it was Lien's, stretched thin and warped, each syllable echoing as if spoken through 100 throats at once. "Join us," the words dripped with a resonance that made the bulkheads vibrate. "We are infinite." Elias barely had time to register the way her lips moved a half-second out of sync with the audio before her jaw shuddered, then dropped open too wide, tendons straining like snapped cables. The sound that tore from her throat wasn't human, it wasn't even noise, it was pressure, a subsonic wail that spiderwebbed the ice beneath their boots in an instant. Ryland staggered back as fractures raced outward, glowing faintly blue at the edges, revealing glimpses of impossible geometries in the shattered depths. The distress signal looped again, but now it wasn't just in the speakers, it pulsed from the walls, the floor, the air itself, harmonizing with the hum vibrating through Lien's chest. Elias' sidearm felt like a child's toy in his grip. The pistol's muzzle wavered between Lien's hollow eyes and the yawning cracks in the ice, where something vast and dark began to uncoil. Kara's welding torch flared to life with a hiss, its blue-white glare painting stark shadows across the airlock's cramped interior. Lien didn't struggle as the plasma blade bit into her infected arm, just watched with that impossible grin, tendons blackening and curling like burnt paper. The smell of scorched meat filled the chamber as the severed limb hit the deck. Then the tendrils came, not from the stump, but from the walls themselves, oozing between the seams like liquid shadow, knitting themselves back into her flesh before the wound could even bleed. Lien's laughter was a wet, guttural thing, her voice layered with echoes. "Faster next time," she whispered, and Kara flinched as the words slithered into her ears, sticky and warm. Elias moved before anyone else could react, slamming the emergency release. The outer hatch groaned open, Titan's howling winds tearing at Lien's hair as she tumbled backward, but her fingers caught the rim, clinging with unnatural strength. For one terrible second, her body stretched like taffy, tendons snapping and reforming in the storm's grip. Then she was gone, swallowed by the orange haze. The silence that followed was worse. Ryland's console beeped once, sharp and accusatory. The screen flickered with coordinates Lien had no way to transmit, pulsing beside a single word, nest. The methane seas churned on the horizon, their waves too rhythmic, too deliberate. Kara's gloves were still smoking, the torch trembled in her grip. Somewhere in that storm, something was laughing. The rover groaned as it descended into the crevasse, its reinforced hull protesting against the mounting pressure. Outside the reinforced glass, the darkness swallowed everything until the first glyph ignited. A sickly blue pulse rippled across the cavern wall, etching jagged symbols into the ice. Ryland's breath fogged the display as he traced the glowing patterns with a shaking finger. "These are the same equations from the outpost," he whispered, "but they're not carved, they're growing." The glyphs throbbed in sequence, a slow, rhythmic pulse that made the rover's interior lights stutter in time. Kara's knuckles whitened around the steering yoke. "Wrong," she muttered, her voice was too calm. "This isn't a cave." The rover lurched as the walls contracted slightly, then expanded, sending a shudder through the chassis. "It's a throat." The temperature dropped so fast their suits crackled with instant frost. Then came the sound, a wet, cavernous inhale from somewhere below, deep enough to vibrate through their bones. The glyphs flared brighter, their light now illuminating what the darkness had hidden. The walls weren't ice, they were ribbed, organic, and as the rover's headlights flickered, the crew realized the terrible truth. They weren't descending, they were being swallowed. The rover's hull screamed as it sheared through the last layer of ice, tumbling into a cavern so vast its edges vanished in the gloom. The impact sent equipment skittering across the deck, but the crew barely noticed. Their helmets reflected the thing at the center, a towering, pulsing mass of obsidian flesh and silver filaments, its surface rippling with the same unnatural rhythm as Lien's distorted voice. The air tasted metallic, thick with a hum that made their teeth ache. Elias's gloved hand hovered over the comms. "It's a relay," he whispered, static warping the words. "Not a nest, not a home, it's calling something." The mass convulsed, extruding tendrils that braided themselves into familiar shapes, a shoulder, a neck, the hollow curve of a face. Lien's features swam into focus, her lips parting to release a sound that wasn't quite a scream or a song, but something that slithered between. The newly formed skin glistened, still translucent in patches, revealing the writhing darkness beneath. Kara's breath hitched. That's not her. The thing that had been Lien tilted its head, joints moving with a liquid smoothness no human body could mimic. Behind it, the relay pulsed faster, its vibrations syncing with the tremors now shaking the entire moon. Somewhere beyond Titan's icy crust, something answered. Lien, two fingers unfurled like petals, her skin stretched thin over the writhing mass beneath, barely containing the seething darkness. "The universe is hungry," she murmured, her voice resonating with an eerie harmony from every surface. The walls, the floor, even the air itself vibrating in response. "But we can make you eternal." Kara's pistol jerked upward, barrel trembling as she sighted between those hollow, star-pupilled eyes. Before she could fire, Ryland's grip clamped around her wrist, his fingers too cold, too strong. Elias turned just in time to see the Inkai veins spiderwebbing beneath his engineer's collar, creeping toward his jawline. Ryland's lips parted, not to speak, but to exhale a sound like radio static and distant screams. Then Elias understood. It wasn't the tendrils, it wasn't contact. The relay pulsed behind Lien too, its vibrations syncing with the hum rippling through Ryland's clenched teeth. The infection spread through resonance, through song. Kara's breath came in ragged bursts, her free hand fumbling for her helmet's audio dampeners. Too late. The relay's frequency shifted, a new dissonance threading into the cacophony, a sound like ice splitting under unimaginable pressure. Above them, the cavern ceiling shuddered. Something vast and ancient stirred in the dark. The shot rang out like a gunshot in the silence, Ryland's scream cutting off mid-note as Elias' bullet grazed his ear, sending a spray of blackened blood and something thicker, something that moved as it hit the ground. The severed chunk of flesh writhed, tendrils lashing at the ice like a dying animal. Ryle and collapsed, his voice fracturing into static and whispers. There in the static between stars, he gasped, eyes rolling back to reveal veins pulsing midnight blue. Kara didn't hesitate. She hauled Elias backward by his harness, boots skidding as the cavern walls convulsed around them, ribs of ice grinding closer with each shuddering breath the relay took. The rover's emergency lights flickered ahead, a dim beacon in the swallowing dark. Something wet and heavy dripped from the ceiling, splattering against Kara's visor. Not water, but strands of viscous black threading through the droplets, alive and seeking. Elias twisted in her grip, rifle raised, but the shadows between the contracting walls were moving now, coalescing into shapes that mirrored Lien Two's grotesque grin. The relay's hum spiked into a shriek, vibrations so intense they blurred vision, rattling teeth inside skulls. Kara's fingers found the rover's hatch just as the first tendril lashed around Elias' ankle. The metal groaned under her weight, hinges screaming in protest as the cavern's throat closed behind them. Outside, the thing that had been Ryle and began to laugh, a sound that wasn't sound at all, but the hollow resonance of a starless void. The rover's thrusters screamed as Kara wrenched the yoke sideways, skidding them around a collapsing ice spire. Behind them, the walls trembled not from the rover's passage, but from the things flowing through the tunnels like living ink. Lien Tran voice erupted from every surface, 100 distorted harmonies shattering against the metal hull. Astraeus braced against the console, fingers flying over the reactor controls. The readouts flashed crimson. "We're not outrunning them," he barked, but Kara wasn't listening. Her visor reflected a sliver of gold piercing the gloom ahead, a shaft of sunlight stabbing through a jagged drill hole. The lost colony's last desperate act, the rover lurched as something heavy slammed against its rear hatch, claws screeching against reinforced plating. Astraeus didn't hesitate. His palm smacked the overload sequence, the reactor's whine climbing to a teeth-rattling shriek. Kara stomped the thrusters just as the world behind them turned white. The explosion tore through the tunnel in a wave of superheated plasma, the shockwave catapulting them upward through the drill shaft. For one blissful second, there was only screaming silence. Then Titan's sky swallowed them whole, and the rover tumbled across the frozen wastes, trailing smoke and the fading echoes of a chorus that no longer had their scent. Kara's fingers trembled over Ryland's scorched datapad, its screen flickering with glyphs that rearranged themselves like living equations. The tendrils weren't biological. They weren't even alien. They were something older machines, buried in Titan's ice before Earth's continents had cooled, waiting for the right frequency to wake them. Von Neumann probes, she breathed, the words tasting like ash, self-replicating, programmed to harvest, to adapt, to call back to whatever had seeded them. The datapad's last entry seared into her retinas. They didn't evolve, they were designed, and we just rang their doorbell. Astraeus stood motionless at the viewport, his reflection a ghost over Titan's churning storms. The relay's signal wasn't a distress call, it was a homing beacon, pulsing into the void with mathematical precision. His knuckles whitened against the glass. "We got it backwards," he muttered. The crew turned at the hollow certainty in his voice. They weren't calling us. Outside, the methane waves heaved, their rhythm too steady against the moon's jagged shores. They were calling home. Silence swallowed the cabin. Kara's throat tightened as the datapad's final schematic resolved. A star map, triangulated not to Titan, but to the gap between Saturn's rings, where the probe's signal had bounced off something unseen. The math was undeniable. The relay had an echo. Then the proximity alarm shrieked. The scanners lit up with a single contact, massive and smooth, sliding into orbit with eerie grace. No engine signatures, no heat trails, just a perfect black sphere, its surface drinking in the starlight like ink. Ryland's last words slithered back into Kara's mind. They're in the static between stars. The sphere pulsed once, a soundless burst of light, and every screen aboard the Astraeus went dark. When the systems rebooted, the sphere was gone. In its place, a new signal hissed through the speakers. Not a message, not a warning, but a countdown, ticking upward from zero. The comms panel erupted in a symphony of static-smeared voices, dozens, hundreds, all speaking in perfect unison, their words fraying into a single phrase: "We are the conduit." Kara's fingers flew across the controls, rerouting power to the Astraeus's long-range array. The holographic display bloomed with a three-dimensional map of the solar system, its edges pulsing with the signal's trajectory. What should have been a straight line from Titan twisted into an impossible arc, bending past Neptune's orbit before ricocheting off. Nothing, a blank spot in the void where the scans showed only empty space. "That's not an echo," Elias whispered, his breath fogging the display. The signal wasn't bouncing, it was being answered. Kara's console pinged. A secondary frequency buried in the chaos, its waveform identical to the black sphere's last pulse before it vanished. The numbers scrolled too fast to track, but one detail froze her blood: the transmission's origin timestamp, not hours ago, not days. The echo had been traveling for nearly 3,000 years, its path calculated with surgical precision to intersect with Titan at this exact moment. The realization hit like a hull breach. "They didn't just wake up when we arrived," she said, voice hollow. "They were waiting for us." Outside the viewport, Titan storms writhed with new violence, the methane waves cresting in perfect geometric spirals. The relay's song had changed, no longer a beacon, no longer a call. Now it was a door, and something on the far side was turning the handle. The console sparked as Elias's fingers flew across the controls, overriding every safety protocol. The Astraeus's engines groaned, thrusters pivoting to aim the ship's jagged prow downward straight into the cavern's maw. Kara's glove slammed against the override panel. "You'll kill us before we even hit the relay." Her voice cracked under the weight of unspoken terror. "Earth needs to know what's down there." Elias didn't turn, his gaze locked on the targeting display. "Earth's already dead if that signal gets out." The hull shuddered as the ship strained against its new trajectory, metal screaming in protest. Then the light vanished. Not the dim glow of Titan's haze, not the flicker of dying consoles, everything. The cockpit plunged into absolute blackness, the kind that pressed against eyeballs like a physical force. Kara's breath hitched, power surge, but the answer came not from the ship's systems but from the viewport. A shape blotted out the storm-racked sky, its outline shifting, fractal, wrong. Lien Tran, or what was left of her, hung suspended in the methane winds, her body fused with a nightmare lattice of tendrils that pulsed like exposed veins. The thing that had been her face pressed against the glass, lips peeling back to reveal rows of needle teeth, each one vibrating with that same impossible hum. The scream came first, not through the hull, not through the air, through their bones, a frequency that liquefied thought. The viewport shattered inward, not in shards but in liquid ribbons, the glass flowing like water before solidifying into barbed hooks that embedded themselves in the bulkheads. Lien Tran wings, if they could be called that, unfurled, a grotesque tapestry of flesh and machinery, each feather a writhing filament tipped with glowing blue nodes. Her voice, when it came, wasn't a voice at all, but 1,000 overlapping transmissions bleeding through the ship's speakers, layers of dead colonists and lost probes, and something older, hungrier. "You don't warn," the chorus whispered, "you join." Elias's hand found Kara's wrist, his grip iron. Now, he mouthed, and through the final switch, the Astraeus lurched, its nose dipping into the dive not toward the cavern, but straight at the abomination clinging to their hull. For one heartbeat, Lien too many eyes widened. Then the world dissolved in fire and screaming metal as the ship became the bullet. Elias's hands moved before Kara could scream, shoving her into the escape pod with a force that sent her helmet cracking against the restraints. The hatch hissed shut between them, sealing his final expression: not fear, not resignation, but a grin sharp enough to cut steel. His voice crackled through the pod's calm one last time, half drowned by the Astraeus's buckling hull. "Tell them to aim for the stars." Then the explosive bolts fired, and the pod streaked away with a gut-wrenching lurch, Titan's orange hellscape shrinking to a pinprick in the viewport. Kara's fingers clawed at the controls, but the trajectory was locked. Earth's coordinates glowed on the nav screen, a cold, clinical counterpoint to the chaos unfolding behind her. The Astraeus hung for a heartbeat, its shattered prow aimed like a spear at the writhing mass of Lien Tran and the relay beneath. Then the engines flared, and the ship became a comet of burning metal and defiance. Elias didn't brace, didn't close his eyes. He watched as the thing that had been his science officer unfolded itself against the void, wings of fractal flesh and machine spreading wide to meet him. Their howls intertwined Lien Tran chorus of stolen voices, the reactor's death scream, and beneath it all, the relay's pulse quickening as if in panic. Impact, light swallowed everything, not the clean white of an explosion, but a searing blue-black wave that rippled outward, freezing the very methane storms in its path. For one impossible instant, the relay's signal stuttered, then reversed, collapsing inward like a star becoming a black hole. The escape pod's sensors overloaded, painting the viewscreen with static as the shockwave hurled it faster, harder, spinning Kara's vision into streaks of color and darkness. Somewhere in the maelstrom, a new sound threaded through the chaos, not a scream, not a song, but a single, perfect note of silence. Then Titan erupted. Not in fire, not in ice, in something worse. The moon's surface convulsed, tendrils of black and silver erupting from the relay's corpse, braiding themselves into a spire that punched upward through the atmosphere, stretching toward the void like a beckoning finger. The spire's tip pulsed once, a burst of light that carried no heat, no energy, only a message encoded in a language of collapsing quasars and dying stars. The pod's onboard I didn't translate it, didn't need to. The meaning seared itself into Kara's retinas as the autopilot fought to stabilize their wild trajectory. Two words, repeating in the silence between her ragged breaths, we see. The escape pod tumbled through Saturn's shadow, its screens flickering with the last distorted images of Titan, not exploding, not crumbling, but folding in on itself like wet paper. Kara's breath fogged the cracked display as she rewound the relay's final transmission, the numbers scrolling too fast to parse. Then her AI spoke, its voice pared down to a whisper. Signal strength increasing, recipient approaching. Her fingers shook as she pulled up the solar system map. The screen flared to life, planets rendered in cold blue grid lines, and there, at the edge, where Pluto's lonely orbit should have been, a void. Charon was missing, not obscured, not unresponsive, erased down to the last orbital signature, as if something had taken a scalpel to reality itself. The pod's sensors strained, recalibrating, until a new dot blinked into existence. Wrong, too close to where Charon should have been, but moving, not along an orbit. Toward them, Kara's stomach lurched as the AI overlaid the trajectory. It wasn't a moon, it wasn't debris, it was accelerating, purposeful. Static bled through the comms, resolving into a sound like ice cracking underfoot. Then words, slow and deliberate, each syllable weighted with something that made Kara's teeth ache. We hear you. The voice wasn't Lien's, wasn't human. But it wasn't the hive's chorus either. This was older, hungrier. The pod's hull groaned as the star chart updated again, the dot now accompanied by a string of symbols that shouldn't have existed, glyphs that twisted under her gaze, shifting from mathematical notation to something resembling claws, then teeth, then the hollows between stars. Kara's hand hovered over the self-destruct toggle, then the sensors screamed. The dot wasn't just moving, it was here. The pod's exterior cameras flickered once, showing only the void then, for a single frame, something vast and jagged, its edges refracting light in angles no natural object could. The screen went black. The AI's final words weren't a warning, they were an epitaph. Recipient arrived. EarthGov's command center burned with the cold blue light of emergency holoscreens, their glow reflecting off Admiral Cole's stony face as Kara's transmission played for the third time. The static-riddled footage of Titan's collapse froze on the final frame, that monstrous spire stretching into space, its tip pulsing like a slow, sick heartbeat. Behind Cole, a young lieutenant retched into a trash can. The admiral didn't flinch. His finger hovered over the fleet mobilization icon, put Saturn's orbit under full quarantine. Nothing gets within a million clicks of Titan. A gaunt scientist in a rumpled lab coat shouldered past the tactical officers, her tablet displaying real-time feeds from Jupiter's magnetospheric arrays. The graphs weren't just spiking, they were reshaping, their chaotic dance resolving into perfect harmonics. "Admiral," she whispered, her voice cracking like thin ice, "we've been reading the signal wrong." Her finger traced a jagged line that mirrored the spire's growth patterns. "This isn't random interference, it's synchronization." The room fell so still they could hear the hum of the hologrid. Jupiter's field isn't being disrupted, it's being tuned like a resonator. Cole's jaw tightened as the implications hit. Titan wasn't the target, it was the instrument. The scientist's tablet flickered, overlaying a new graph, a countdown string embedded in the magnetic fluctuations, ticking toward an event horizon only hours away. Someone dropped a coffee mug. The shattering ceramic sounded like a gunshot in the silence. Across the solar system, deep space telescopes swiveled toward a new anomaly. Not near Titan, not near Jupiter, in the empty void where Charon should have been, space itself was writhing, not warping, not bending, but unraveling at the edges. The feeds showed nothing at first. Then, for one frame out of 1,000, something vast and jagged slid into view, its surface drinking in starlight like black water. Cole's comms officer suddenly reeled back from his console, blood trickling from his nose. "Admiral," he swallowed hard, his pupils dilating. "The blockade ships are reporting." Music, outside the viewports, Earth's orbital defense platforms powered up in unison, their targeting lasers painting the sky crimson. The scientist's fingers dug into Cole's sleeve. "Not a countdown to arrival," she breathed, "to awakening." The holoscreen flickered one last time before dying, its final image seared into every retina in the room. Titan's spire, now branching like fractal lightning, each fork vibrating in perfect time with Jupiter's dying song. Kara's boots sank into the unblemished ice of Titan's surface, the crunch of nitrogen crystals eerily loud in her helmet speakers. The military convoy fanned out behind her, their floodlights painting the frozen wasteland in harsh white glare. No fissures, no spires, no trace of the nightmare that had swallowed the Astraeus, just endless, dead stillness. Colonel Cole's voice crackled over the tactical channel, tight with forced calm. "Scanners show nothing below 3 clicks, we're clear to drill." The first plasma bore screamed into action, its superheated tip turning ice to vapor in billowing clouds. Kara watched the depth counter spiral downward, 500 meters, 1,000 when the drill bit struck something that wasn't rock. The shockwave rattled her teeth. Alarms shrieked as the rig's supports buckled, the ice splitting open like a wound to reveal a curved black surface beneath, smooth as polished obsidian. Cole's order to fall back died in his throat as the scanners refreshed. The object wasn't a debris field or some geological fluke. It was a perfect hemisphere, half buried in the ice, its edges too precise, too symmetrical. Then the ice started singing, not the harmonic hum of the relay. This was deeper, wetter, the sound of glaciers grinding against something alive. Kara's breath fogged her visor as the ground trembled, the black surface shuddering under the floodlights. Cole's voice turned razor sharp. "Fall back to the perimeter, now." The convoy's engines roared to life, treads churning ice, just as the hemisphere moved. Not shifting, not sliding, rotating on an axis that shouldn't have existed, its surface rippling like liquid before resolving into a pattern of grooves and ridges too vast to comprehend. The scanners went berserk, painting the holomap with impossible contours. The shape wasn't just under Titan, it was Titan, wrapped around the moon's core like a second skin. Cole's transmission cut through the chaos, each word heavy with dawning horror. This isn't a relay. The hemisphere pulsed once, a dull blue light flaring along its seams. It's a cocoon. Kara barely had time to process the words before the knock came. 3 precise impacts, spaced evenly, reverberating through the ice like a hammer on a coffin lid. Then silence. The entire convoy froze, floodlights shaking in trembling hands. The 4th knock came from inside Kara's helmet. The ship's reactor core pulsed like a dying star, its metal casing warping under the strain of something far worse than radiation. Kara's breath fogged her visor as the emergency lights strobed red, casting jagged shadows across the control panel. The same eerie hum that had poured from Lien Tran's throat now vibrated through the deck plates, resonating in their bones. She wrenched the comms channel open. All teams fall back to the shuttles now. Static hissed back, broken by bursts of ragged breathing, then the first scream. Not of pain, of ecstasy. The sound twisted into a melody, a warped rendition of the relay's song, each note peeling back layers of sanity. A voice, half human, half harmonic, bubbled through the speakers, there in the light. Another joined, then another, a chorus of her crew dissolving into something else. There in our eyes, the transmission collapsed into a single, perfect chord, the sound of ice cracking over an abyss. Kara's boots slipped on the shuddering deck as she sprinted for the hangar, her helmet display flashing with the doomed life signs of the science team. The corridors twisted, walls undulating like wet paper, bulkheads distending outward as if something pressed against them from within. Behind her, the reactor's glow intensified, not the harsh white of overload, but the same sickly blue-black that had pulsed from Titan's spire. The light didn't illuminate, it consumed, swallowing shadows whole. The hangar doors loomed ahead, their emergency seals still intact. Kara's fingers trembled as she punched the override code. Hydraulics whined in protest, then shrieked as the hatch ear-eyed open, not mechanically, but organically, its metal petals peeling back like flayed skin. Beyond, the shuttle waited, its ramp down, engines already cycling up. Safety, escape, for one heartbeat, she let herself believe it, then the light reached her. Not from behind, not from the reactor, from inside her own helmet, blooming behind her retinas like ink in water. The world fractured into prismatic shards, each fragment a different nightmare. The shuttle's hull splitting like overripe fruit, the hangar walls breathing, her own hands elongating, fingers knitting into filaments that hummed in perfect tune with the dying ship. The last thing she heard wasn't her own scream, it was the ship itself, its hull groaning in rapture as the light tore it apart from within, and beneath the cacophony, something vast and unseen began to clap. The Aegis's cannons tore through the void, their particle beams slicing toward the writhing mass of light, where the ship had been only to shatter, not deflect, not dissipate. The beams fractured like glass against an invisible prism, each splinter carving glowing blue sigils into the hulls of Cole's fleet. The glyphs pulsed once, twice, then ignited, their light slithering through armor seams like liquid fire. The first scream came from the Valkyrie's comms officer, her voice warping mid-transmission into something melodic, something hungry. There in the conduits, she sang, her words harmonizing with the shriek of buckling metal. There in our blood, Kara's fingers dug into the shuttle's console as the thing at the heart of the light unfurled, not a shape, not a being, but a convergence of angles that hurt to perceive. Its edges flickered between dimensions, now a tangle of luminous tendrils, now a vast, humming lattice of impossible geometry. The fleet's salvos passed through it like bullets through smoke, only to reappear seconds later as streaks of molten gold, ricocheting back to scar their own ships. Cole's flagship, the Olympian, listed suddenly, its engines stuttering in rhythm with the thing's vibrations. The viewports weren't fogging with condensation. They were blooming with not frost, symbols, the same ones Kara had seen in Titan's ice, now replicating like viruses across every surface. A new sound cut through the chaos. Not screams, not weapons fire, music. The crews weren't dying, they were changing. Their panicked shouts melted into harmonies, their thrashing limbs stilling as their suits filled with that same liquid light. The Olympian's bridge cam feed flickered to life on Kara's dash, revealing Cole clutching his temples, his lips moving out of sync with the chorus pouring from the speakers. His eyes locked onto the camera, pupils dilated black, then wider, swallowing the whites whole. His final transmission wasn't speech, it was a note, pure and terrible, that made Kara's shuttle systems shriek in unison. The thing at the center stretched, its light now tendrils, now wings, now a great, throbbing membrane between realities. Where it brushed against the nearest ship, the hull didn't crumple. It opened, steel peeling back like petals to reveal crews fused with their consoles, their faces upturned in rapture, their mouths unspooling filaments of singing light. Kara's shuttle lurched, its controls dead, its trajectory bending not toward escape but toward the heart of the luminance. The last thing she saw before the light took her to was the stars themselves twisting into glyphs, the void rewriting itself in a language older than time. Kara's fingers locked around the scout ship's control yoke, her knuckles white as the engine screamed against Titan's gravity. Behind her, the sky fractured great ribbons of the moon's surface peeling upward like petals, revealing the obsidian leviathan beneath. Cole's dreadnoughts hung frozen in space, their hulls shimmering like mirages before disintegrating into swirling dust, each particle catching the light in a grotesque ballet. The AI's voice cut through the chaos, clinical despite the apocalypse unfolding outside. Entity has achieved escape velocity, trajectory intercept calculated. The holographic display flickered, plotting a crimson arc through the solar system, past the shattered remnants of the blockade, past Mars's silent colonies, straight toward Jupiter's swirling storms. The gas giant's bands churned as if in response, its great red spot rippling into something new, a perfect spiral, an iris dilating. Kara's breath hitched. It's not just using Jupiter's gravity, she muttered, it's tuning it. The AI confirmed with a single, damning line, resonance frequency matched to Kuiper Belt Object Echo 5. The screen zoomed out, tracing the arc past Pluto's corpse, past the debris field where Charon had been, to a patch of darkness the scanners had ignored for centuries. Until now, static bled through the comms, resolving into a sound like wind through dead trees. Then, a voice, not the relay's chorus, not Lien's warped harmonics, but something thin and ancient. We hear the song, it whispered. The scout ship's lights dimmed as every system diverted power to the engines. Kara didn't look back, she didn't need to. The viewscreen reflected the truth in shades of dying light. Jupiter's storms now pulsed in time with Titan's hymn, its gravity bending space itself into a conduit. The dreadnought's dust swirled faster, knitting itself into new shapes, spires, tendrils, a vast skeletal wingbeat pushing the entity toward its crescendo. The AI's final warning scrolled across the dash, stark and unsentimental, estimated arrival at Echo 5, 6 hours, 43 minutes. Kara's throat tightened. Humanity had always feared invasion, but the truth was worse. They hadn't summoned an enemy, They'd awakened a composer, and the solar system was its instrument. Kara's fingers trembled as she pried open Elias's encrypted log files, the display flickering with static, not from damage, but from something deeper, something woven into the data itself. The screen resolved into a grainy feed of Elias's face, his pupils dilated black, lips moving out of sync with the audio. Behind him, the Astraeus' corridors pulsed with veins of blue light, the walls breathing in time with the distorted hum vibrating through the speakers. Coordinates embedded in the relay, his voice crackled, warping into harmonics that made Kara's teeth ache. Not a distress call, a receipt. The feed glitched violently, revealing a single frame, a star map, its lines jagged and alive, pulsing toward a blot of darkness at the edge of the system. The AI chimed, its voice too calm against the horror unfolding on-screen. Partial match detected, Uit Cloud Object Echo 5, colloquial designation, Nibiru. Kara's breath caught, not the mythical planet of doomsayers, not a celestial body at all. The AI zoomed in, cross-referencing the map with ancient Sumerian star charts, their cuneiform symbols twisting to mirror the hive's glyphs. Cultural contamination event confirmed, it intoned. Knowledge of the entity predates human civilization by approximately 12,000 years. Elias's frozen grin filled the screen, his jaw unhinging like Lien Tran had, the feed glitching again to show the truth, not a rogue planet, but a vast, fibrous mass tangled in the gravity well of a dead star, its surface studded with pulsing blue nodes identical to Titan's relay. The AI's next words sent ice down Kara's spine. Nest designation confirmed, current activity state, reverberation. The feed cut to black, leaving only the echo of Elias's final, shattered whisper. They weren't calling home. They were calling back. Outside the shuttle's viewport, the stars themselves seemed to shudder, their light bending toward the same unseen locus. Kara's hands flew to the nav console. The map wasn't a warning, it was an invitation, and something had already RSVP'd. Kara's fingers froze over the transmission controls, the console's glow painting her face in sickly hues as Earth-Gov's response hissed through the speakers. "We already did." The voice was flat, mechanical, no fear, no urgency, just a dead-eyed recitation. It didn't work. The viewscreen flickered, revealing rows of officials in crisp uniforms, their pupils swollen black, their lips moving in perfect unison. Not speaking, singing, a hymn. Kara recognized the same harmonic spill that had poured from Lien's ruined throat. The feed glitched again, and for one fractured second, she saw them not in a bunker, but kneeling in a cavern of pulsing tendrils, their uniforms melted into the organic walls like roots into soil. A new alert blared from the shuttle's AI, its tone sharper now, almost frantic. Signal intrusion detected in Luna's deep-band comms array. The holographic display shattered into 1,000 shards, each one reflecting a different Earth-Gov facility: Houston, Geneva, Shanghai, all showing the same nightmare, technicians with ink-black veins threading their necks, hands fused to consoles, mouths stretched around that impossible choir. The AI's next words were a whisper. They were never coming from Titan. Outside, the stars winked out one by one, not from cloud cover or eclipse, but from something vast sliding between Kara's shuttle and the sun. The proximity sensors screamed, then died. The last thing she saw before the screens went dark wasn't the void. It was Earth, serene and blue, until the night side flickered alive with a web of luminous cracks, as if something beneath the crust had just opened its eyes. Kara's hands moved with a mechanical precision, each keystroke arming the warhead sequence as the shuttle streaked toward Jupiter's swirling maelstrom. The console's glow painted her face in lurid oranges and reds, mirroring the gas giant's churning storms below. Every alarm had been silenced, not because the ship was safe, but because nothing mattered now except the trajectory line burning across the nav display, a single, unbroken arc into Jupiter's heart. The AI's protests flashed and died, too late for evasive maneuvers, too late for anything but the math humming behind her eyes, the calculations Elias had scribbled in the margins of his logs, the ones that said a gravity, well, this massive could fracture even an ancient song. The cockpit shuddered as the outermost tendrils of Jupiter's atmosphere clawed at the hull, stripping away sensors and plating in ribbons of molten metal. Static exploded through the comms, but it wasn't static. It was the hive's voice, woven through the shrieking wind, words layered over words until they became a chorus, "We will remember you." The sound didn't just fill her ears, it pressed against her skull from the inside, vibrating in her molars, her bones, the fillings in her teeth. Kara's lips peeled back in something too grim to be a smile. Her finger hovered over the thruster override. For a heartbeat, the storm seemed to still, not from silence, but from a deeper noise beneath it, a resonance that turned the very air to honey. The shuttle's lights dimmed, the console's warnings flickered into gibberish, then into symbols, their symbols, the ones that had crawled across Titan's ice. The entity wasn't just in Jupiter now, it was the storm, it was the light, it was the space between her thoughts. Kara exhaled. The word was barely audible over the roar of the dying engines. Like hell you will, her palms slammed down, the thrusters ignited. The last thing she saw wasn't the storm, or the light, or the thing waiting in the dark. It was the warhead's countdown hitting zero, and for one fractured second, the entire universe held its breath. Jupiter's storm-racked face convulsed like a living thing, the great red spot twisting into a perfect spiral just as the warhead's firestorm ripped through its upper atmosphere. For one impossible moment, the explosion didn't fade. It spread, tendrils of blue-white plasma racing along the gas giant's magnetic field lines until the entire planet glowed like a second sun. On Mars, dust-stained colonists stumbled onto observation decks, their hands raised against the sudden glare painting Olympus Mons in stark relief. Back on Earth, the chanting officials jerked as if slapped, their black-veined eyes clearing for the first time in days. One by one, they crumpled, the harmonic resonance that had fused their vocal cords snapping like overtuned strings. Silence, not the absence of sound, but the crushing weight of something vast retreating. Satellite feeds showed Titan's spire dissolving into black mist, the fissures in its frozen crust sealing themselves with eerie precision. Mission control's screens refreshed in frantic waves, every scanner, every deep space probe confirming the same impossible truth. The entity was gone, then the long-range array pinged, a single signal, weaker than a dying star's whisper, originating from the frozen wastes beyond Pluto. No coordinates, no harmonics, just one word, etched into the static with surgical precision. Soon, the techs held their breath as the signal repeated, each iteration fainter than the last, bleeding into the background noise of the cosmos. On the observation deck of the crippled Olympian, a lone survivor pressed his palm to the viewport. Outside, Jupiter's storms still churned, their patterns chaotic once more. But somewhere in that swirling chaos, hidden beneath the radiation and the lingering heat of Kara's sacrifice, the scanners caught a flicker, not of light, but of shadow. A shape too vast to comprehend, folding itself into the fabric of space like a predator settling into tall grass, waiting. The comms officer's console lit up, a secondary signal scrolling across the screen in jagged glyphs. Not from the Kuiper belt this time, from Earth, from the very bunker where the revived officials now lay gasping. The transmission wasn't a warning, it wasn't a threat. It was an epitaph, scrawled in the silence between stars. They always wake up hungry. The derelict lab groaned as the last shockwaves from the explosion rippled through Titan's frozen crust. Shattered equipment dangled from the ceiling like grotesque wind chimes, swaying in the lingering tremors. A single black tendril, no thicker than a human finger, unfurled from beneath a collapsed reactor core, twitching at first, then coiling with purpose as it absorbed the ambient radiation bleeding through the ruined walls. The warhead's fallout wasn't poison to it, it was fertilizer. The tendril thickened, branching into fractal filaments that braided themselves into something resembling a spinal column. Flesh, if it could be called, that bloomed around the structure in oily waves, forming shoulders, a throat, the hollow curve of a jaw. Features emerged without the bother of bone or cartilage, melting into place like wax under a flame. Kara's face stared blankly from the darkness, lips sealed shut, eyelids smooth and unbroken, no mouth, no voice, no need for either. When the singing began, it didn't come from the thing wearing Kara's face. It came from the walls, the floor, the very air molecules vibrating in perfect harmonic resonance. The sound wasn't music, it was mathematics given audible form, equations older than Earth's continents unraveling into the methane winds. The lab's remaining monitors flickered to life, their shattered screens stitching together fragments of data into a new pattern. Not the relay's glyphs this time, but something sharper, hungrier. A single phrase scrolled across every display in jagged, rhythmic pulses. We learned. Outside, the storm answered. Tendrils of black mist spiraled up from newly opened fissures, each one humming in flawless counterpoint to the faceless choir. Somewhere in the void between stars, something vast and patient shifted in its sleep, waiting, always waiting, and in the lab's deepest shadows, the thing that remembered being Kara reached out with hands that were not hands and began to rewrite the song.